Today's sermon could have two titles. It could be the one in your bulletin, Follow the Master's Plan, or it could have the one that's on the top of my notes that I thought about after the one I gave to Ann to put in the bulletin, and that is, It's All About the Wall. We're going to talk about the wall that Nehemiah had built today, and some interesting things that we can learn from that. Before we get there, I did get some pictures to the AV department, though. This is what happens when you don't follow the plan. Look at a couple of these pictures. There's someone that had a plan, but they didn't follow it very well, did they? This next one is good. I want you, those of you who think you could get up this driveway, raise your hand. Not this one, this next one. Let's see this next one. Look at that. I mean, even without ice, there's no way in the world you could get up that driveway. So, a couple examples of what happens when you don't follow the plan, right? Strange things happen when you don't follow the plan. And the joy of following a plan is harmonious and coordinated work. Let's review, shall we? The Book of Nehemiah focuses on the qualities that God desires of anyone he calls upon to restore what has broken down. Now, spiritually speaking, Nehemiah paints a picture, if you will, of what happens when God moves his people to restore his purposes for them. Purposes, by the way, which had been destroyed or disfigured by their own disobedience. And so let's go back through those things we've talked about. I'm just going to mention, I'd like to preach again on all of them because there's things I left out and I'd like to say better, but I'm not going to do that. Let's just hit the high points, the major points of the sermons we've had to this point. When God wants to renew the broken, he moves his people to weep, to be broken over the things that break his heart. He moves his people to self-examination and confession. Am I the reason this is broken? If so, Father, forgive me at this point. He moves his people to remember his promises of what he does want to restore, what he does want to renew. He moves his people to trust his provision. He moves his people to pray for guidance. He moves his people to see with a vision that extends beyond themselves. And then he moves his people to evaluate the condition of the work, and once evaluated, unite around a corporate purpose. In today's text, we're going to see that when an unseen plan behind the scenes is present, the coordination of the efforts of God's people makes a beautiful tapestry. Now, to do that, we have to go back and read the text. The text is Nehemiah. I told you several weeks ago, or maybe when we started, that Nehemiah is not the easiest book to find in the Bible. But if you find the Psalms, and go back before the Psalms is Job. And back before Job is Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, those three little books after the Kings and Chronicles, Samuel, and before Job are those three little books, Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther. So Psalms, Job, Esther, Nehemiah. So if you want backwards from the middle of your Bible, you'll find it there. We're going to read the third chapter. Let me warn you. Third chapter is not normally a chapter you would read in the context of a worship service. You say, why are you going to read it then? Well, because I want to. My sermon's only 10 minutes long, and so I need 10 minutes. No, not really. You know better than that, right? Because the main point of today's sermon is not anything we'll read. It's behind what we'll read. So to get behind what we read, we have to read. So I hope it'll make sense. So it's a little long. Hang in there with me, okay? Hang in there with me. There's some names. There's about 40 names, unpronounceable names, but we'll get through it. Nehemiah 3. Then Eliashib the high priest arose with his brothers and priests and built the sheep gate. They consecrated it and hung its doors. I should stop and say the whole text, the whole third chapter is the narrative of how the wall was rebuilt. Okay. They consecrated it and hung its doors. They consecrated the wall to the Tower of the 100 and the Tower of Hananel. Next to him, the men of Jericho built, and next to them, Zaccur, the son of Imri, built. Now the sons of Hassanah built the fish gate, and they laid its beams and hung its doors with its bolts and bars. And next to them, Meremoth, the son of Uriah, the son of Hakkoz, made repairs. And next to him, Meshullam, the son of Berechiah, the son of Meshezabel, made repairs. And next to him, Zadok, the son of Baana, also made repairs. Moreover, next to him, the Tekoites made repairs, but their nobles did not support the work of their masters. Joiada, the son of Paseah, and Meshullam, the son of Besodiah, repaired the old gate. They laid its beams and hung its doors with its bolts and its bars. Next to them, Melatiah, the Gibeonite, and Jadon, the Meronothite, the men of Gibeon and the men of Mitzpah, also made repairs for the official seat of the governor of the province beyond the river. And next to him, Uzziel, the son of Harhiah, of the goldsmiths, made repairs. And next to him, Hananiah, one of the perfumers, made repairs. And they restored Jerusalem as far as the broad wall. And next to them, Raphiah, the son of Hur, the official of half the district of Jerusalem, made repairs. And next to them, Jediah, the son of Harumath, made repairs opposite his house. And next to him, Hattush, the son of Hashabaniah, made repairs. Melchijah, the son of Harim, and Hashab, the son of Pahath Moab, repaired another section of the tower of furnaces. And next to him, Shallum, the son of Halashes, the official of half the district of Jerusalem, made repairs, he and his daughters. Hanan and the inhabitants of Zanoah repaired the valley gate. They built it and hung its doors and its bolts and its bars, and 1,000 cubits of the wall to the refuse gate. Melchijah the son of Rechab, the official of the district of Bethacharem, repaired the refuse gate. He built it and hung its doors with its bolts and its bars. Shallum, the son of Kol-Hozah, the official of the district of Mizpah, repaired the fountain gate. He built it, covered it, and hung its doors with its bolts and its bars, and the wall of the pool of Shelah at the king's garden, as far as the steps that descend from the city of David. After him, Nehemiah, the son of Azbuk, this is a different Nehemiah, official of half the district of Bethzur, made repairs as far as a point opposite the tombs of David, and as far as the artificial pool and the house of the mighty men. Let's take a breather, okay? Whew. They're getting on with it, aren't they? Verse 17. After him, the Levites carried out repairs under Rehum, the son of Bani. Next to him, Hashabiah, the official of half the district of Keilah, carried out repairs for his district. After him, their brothers carried out repairs under Bavai, the son of Henadad, official of the other half of the district of Keilah. Next to him, Ezer, the son of Jeshua, the official of Mizpah, repaired another section in front of the ascent of the armory at the angle. And after him, Baruch, the son of Zabai, zealously repaired another section from the angle to the doorway of the house of Eliashib, the high priest. We found him in the first verse. He's somewhere else. After him, Meremoth, the son of Uriah, the son of Hakkoz, repaired another section from the doorway of Eliashib's house, even as far as the end of his house. After him, the priests, the men of the valley, carried out repairs. And after them, Benjamin and Hashab carried out repairs in front of their house. And after them, Azariah, the son of Messiah, son of Ananiah, carried out repairs beside his house. After him, Benui, the son of Henadad, repaired another section from the house of Azariah, as far as the angle and as far as the corner. Palal, the son of Uzai, made repairs in front of the angle and the tower projecting from the upper house of the king, which is by the court of the guard. And after him, Pedaiah, the son of Parash, made repairs. The temple servants living in Ophel made repairs as far as the front of the water gate toward the east and the projecting tower. And after them, the Tekoites repaired another section in front of the great projecting tower and as far as the wall of Ophel. Above the horse gate, the priests carried out repairs, each in front of his house. And after them, Zadok, the son of Immer, carried out repairs in front of his house. And after him, Shemaiah, the son of Shechaniah, the keeper of the east gate, carried out repairs. And after him, Hananiah, the son of Shelemiah, and Hanan, the sixth son of Zalaph, repaired another section. After him, Meshullam, the son of Berechiah, carried out repairs in front of his own quarters. And after him, Malchijah, one of the goldsmiths, carried out repairs as far as the house of the temple servants and of the merchants, in front of the inspection gate, and as far as the upper room of the corner, between the upper room of the corner and the sheep gate, the goldsmiths and the merchants carried out repairs. Whew. We made it. What do we learn from that? Here's what we learned. It's the only point today. I was going to give you 2 points because there's 3, but I only had time to give you 2. But this morning I decided I was only going to give you 1 because the 1 point that we're going to talk about today is the overarching point of this passage. And there's 2 subpoints that are kind of applications of what it means. So I'm going to save those for next week. Those are the best. So if this is okay, then next week will be better. All right? Here's the point. When God wants to renew the broken, he moves his people to follow a master plan. Now the plan is not mentioned in this passage, but it's everywhere in this passage. It united the work of 40 plus foremen. It united the work of putting together 10 gates. Did you notice the naming of the gates of the city of Jerusalem there? The sheep gate, the fish gate, the odd gate, the valley gate, the refuse gate, fountain gate, water gate, horse gate, east gate, inspection gate. And 2 miles, those archaeologists who've done their digs and work around the old city of Jerusalem say that wall that is described here was about 2 miles in the perimeter of it. All that implies that their work was coordinated by a master planner, that would be Nehemiah, who had a master plan. If each one of these foremen and each one of the workers of those foremen had brought his own idea of what the wall should look like, or where it should go, it would have been a disaster. It would have been an architectural nightmare. It would have been like the pictures you saw earlier. If there had not been a plan that was followed, the wall never would have met when it needed to meet and been what it needed to be. Imagine if Hassenaah decided to put the fish gate together with a pattern that he saw on this old house. And it didn't fit the part of the wall that was coming to it from the other way by Meremoth, who was influenced by the guy who flips houses in Las Vegas that you see on Saturday night sometimes. In the context of our series, God desires to restore, to renew his church, and he calls us to take part in that renewal. But he's not looking to us for a new definition of church. He already knows what the church should look like. So to be effective and useful, coordinated in our efforts, we all need to be building according to the master plan. Now, in any analogy, somewhere it breaks down. Okay? And this is where it breaks down in this particular analogy. In every culture, in every age, the physical, local church may look different from the outside. If we took a eagle's flight today, over all the world and all the world's cultures to see down upon the different churches, local churches that are meeting across the world, it would be so different We'd see a lot of roofs and cross-shaped buildings like we see here. But we got over China, and we looked down, and we couldn't see anything because the church is underground. And it might be meeting in someone's living room, and there might be just 3 or 4 families. And they might not be singing because it would draw attention to themselves. And they might not even have scriptures. They might be quoting the scriptures that they've memorized from one source Bible because Bibles are too expensive. So the church in China would look a whole lot different than it does here in Royal Oak today. And if you fly a little bit further over Korea, you'd see huge mega churches and 10 and 15, 20. The largest church in the world is in Korea, in South Korea, in Seoul. I think they've got 100,000 members. Because they don't all meet at one time. They're spread out over the whole city. But if you looked in Korea, it would be different and very formal and very structured. And then if you flew a little further over East Kentucky or West Virginia, it'd look even a little different there, wouldn't it? The point is, the local church is going to look different. Now the wall, the Nehemiah's wall was uniform. God had a master plan for that wall. God has a master plan for the church, but not necessarily for how it looks. Where's the master plan? There are plenty of auxiliary works that claim to be guidebooks and explanations of the master plan. I've got many of them in my library. I looked through it the other day and picked out some titles. Church Growth, How to Grow an Impact Church, The Deliberate Church, Simple Church, Who Stole My Church, 9 Marks of a Healthy Church, Models of the Church, Images of the Church in the New Testament, Missional Church. Many of these are excellent guides and worthy of study and application. Others not, quite so worthy of the time we give them. We could look to the book of Acts, like we already read today, a descriptive evaluation, if you will, of the early church and its activities. What were they doing? They were teaching, practicing ordinances, fellowship, sharing, evangelism. And we could apply the function of what we see in the book of Acts, not necessarily the form, but the function of what was being accomplished. We could look on your own worship guide. Worshiping God, loving you, reaching the world. That's not just something we threw on there. We took those from the grand commandment. When Jesus was asked, what's the greatest commandment? He didn't go back to the 10 commandments. He went back to Deuteronomy. He said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second is like unto it, love your neighbor as yourself. He went to Leviticus 19 for that one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, love your neighbor as yourself, and then we take the Great Commission. Go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. That's where those 3 points come from. And so we could say, well, what's the master plan of the church? Love God, love each other, and take the gospel to the world. And if the church is doing that, then it's fulfilling its commission. I know one church, and they've boiled it down to 2 things. And their mission statement and what they put on their webpage and on their worship guide is simply loving God, loving people. You could boil it down to that. Those are all good. But here's the bottom line. God's church, the corporate body of believers, is not an organization. It's a living, breathing organism. It's you and me together. And it's you and me and Lionel Brique and Jose Padilla and Shin Chang and Dieter Klaus. And you add any other name from any other culture and linguistic group that you want. It's them and us and you and me together. And if God is desirous of renewing that organism, it's the individual parts of it that need to be renewed. And the only way for the entire organism to be restored, to be healthy, is for the individual parts to be healthy. Now, what would be great is if I could say to you, and I almost did in my planning of this message, that you are only responsible for your part of the wall. And that part is you. To be sure, that is your major responsibility. And my major responsibility, if you want to use this wall analogy, I'm one brick in the wall, or one section of the wall, and I'm responsible for that part of that wall. That wall is me. And that's true in part. I mean, we look to Romans chapter 12. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. Paul says, I'm calling you to make yourself a sacrifice, to be a part of that thing we call the church. Whether you use the analogy of a brick or part of the wall. But each of us is also called to build up one another. I find it so interesting that the word that Paul uses in his epistles to describe what we are supposed to be toward one another is the word edify or edification. What does edify mean? Edify means to build up. 1 Corinthians 14, it's the whole question about spiritual gifts and how people were misusing their spiritual gifts, and as a result it was tearing things apart. And so Paul was trying to restore unity and restore fellowship in this church. And one of the things he said at the end of chapter 14, what's the outcome, brethren? He's referring to the spiritual gifts that were being misused. When you assemble, each one has a psalm, each one has a teaching, a revelation, a tongue, an interpretation. Let all things, he said that's what's happening. And then he says this is what should happen. Let all things be done for edification, for building each other up. He says, so you, since you are zealous of spiritual gifts, seek to abound for the edification of the church. In Ephesians 4, he said, let no unwholesome word proceed from your mouth, but only such a word as is good for edification, according to the need of the moment, so that it will give grace to those who hear. So yes, I'm responsible for myself and my part of the wall, that by grace and the holiness of God I be the person that He calls me to be. But I'm also responsible in the context of this analogy of building, I'm responsible for you. And you're responsible for me. Because we're called to build each other up in this thing we call the church. Do you remember the sermon series we did? I have no sense of time anymore. So I don't know when it was. It was a year ago, half a year ago, 3, 4, 5 years ago. We called it Grace in This Place. Remember that sermon series? We took Mark McPeak's book, Grace in the Empty Spaces. We used that for Sunday school curriculum, and then my sermons went along with that week by week. We took the one another passages out of Scripture. Love one another. Forgive one another. Submit to one another. Pray for one another. Fellowship with one another. Serve one another. And so yes, we're responsible for ourselves, but the New Testament prescription for holiness and grace must be embraced by each of us individually. But I am not alone. And you are not alone. I am both building and builder. I am both edifice and edifier. Now there are probably hundreds of models and ways, from simple to complex, that local churches use to structure themselves organizationally, that still fit the biblical goal of being a living organism. But the master plan that can't be ignored is pretty simple. Be edified. Be built up in the image of God in Christ Jesus. And be an edifier, building others up by way of spiritual involvement in their lives. And you should also always add the parenthesis, to the degree they give you permission. We give that opportunity here to learn, to fellowship, to serve one another and serve others who are not yet of this body. All of which are a part of worship. Not just what we do on Sunday morning. That's worship, but that's not all of worship. All of that is worship. Learning, fellowshipping, serving one another. And when we don't take advantage of those opportunities, we're guilty of replacing the master plan with our own idea of how the wall, the church, should be restored or be renewed. Now, this is when I was going to give you point one of the two subpoints. So we're going to come back to this passage next week. I want to show you two things about what kind of people were involved in the building, and then where they built and how they didn't complain about where they were assigned a spot on that wall. But here's the conclusion to this point today. This whole chapter confirms that the building of the wall was the most important thing for the moment. It was bigger than the goldsmiths and the priests' thoughts about how the wall should be built or their particular talents for building. And in the same way, the plan for God's church supersedes any particular idea I might have about how I think it should look, or even meet my particular needs. God has the master plan. And it includes building each other up and being a part of that building, an integral part. I read a story this week about a church, an Orthodox church. The church officials of the Orthodox denomination discovered in 2008 that one of their buildings was missing. How does a building go missing? It was a 200-year-old building in the northeast part of Moscow. It had been unused for about 10 years, from the time of the perestroika and the falling of the wall and the Cold War being ended, and there's about a 10-year period where it wasn't used. But in 2008, they were experiencing growth, and they wanted to consider reopening that church building for other bodies of believers that were coming to faith. And they discovered, and when they looked into using that building, it wasn't there anymore. So they did a little bit of investigation, found out that there was a village nearby, and the villagers would come under cover of night and chip brick by brick out of that building and sell it to an entrepreneur who would buy it for 4 cents a brick to build a warehouse somewhere in their village. So the two-story facility didn't go from being a building to a non-building in one stroke of a bulldozer, but the bricks were chiseled away one by lots of little people. And, of course, the analogy I think you can see. Some churches that are not built by bricks but by living stones, we are the living stones in God's church, are not reduced by one fatal stroke. For the most part, I don't know any church that's just been here today and gone tomorrow. But rather by Christians, one by one, choosing to walk away from the wall. Each decision means one less living stone. And in the end, the church, intended by God to be the display of His glory, has been chiseled away and is no more. Conversely, each person who gets involved helps to build a holy temple of the Lord made up of living bricks where Christ is glorified. Here's what I want you to take away from this today. Jesus said He would build His church. He said, I will build my church. And He began that by giving His life in exchange for your sin. So if you haven't taken that step, that's the first step that you need to take. To be a part of His organism, the church, is to accept by faith the grace that He offers to you, that He purchased on Calvary, dying for your sin. That's how you get into the church. That's how you become a living stone. But if you're already in the church, the New Testament letters confirm that those who are being born again into his universal church, that's the church with a capital C, that's the church of Tom McCullough and Lionel Briquet and Shin Chun and all those individuals all over the world. We make up the invisible church with a capital C. All those people in that universal church, we congregate ourselves into local assemblies of believers. That's church with a little c. And when that universal church or the local church is being renewed by God, it must be according to his plan. The form is less important than the function. The wall had a function to keep people out. Now, that's not the function of the church, but that was the function of a wall. It didn't matter too much what it looked like. It just needed to keep people out. But so we ask ourselves, are we the renewed church? Am I the renewed church? Am I growing in grace and holiness and building others up in the same way? That's the takeaway today. Am I a living stone in this church, number one? And am I a living stone in this church, building myself up and building others up to make this church what it needs to be? Some of us have been called to pray recently, and I've challenged you to a time of prayer and fasting several weeks ago. And you might say, but I'm not a mystic. I'm not a great prayer warrior. Well, nonetheless, God calls us to pray. So what I'd like to do today is extend. I called you several weeks ago to pray up till February 10th. 1 day a week, one meal that day, to set aside for a time of prayer and fasting. As we self-examine, that's right back at the beginning, weep and then self-examine and confess. I want to extend that through the season of Lent. Wednesday signals the first day of Lent. Tuesday's Mardi Gras, the last day before Lent. Then we got those 40 days before Easter. I want to extend this call to you and to me of a single meal a week to prayer and fasting. You do it whatever meal you want, whatever works best for you. And your prayer, this is what I'm encouraging your prayer to be. Lord, reveal to me areas of my life that are not pleasing to you. Lord, reveal to me areas of my life that are not pleasing to you. Lord, show me ways you want me to be involved in the renewal of my church. Lord, show me ways that you want me to be involved in the renewal of my church. How can I be an edifier, a builder up, as this church, capital C and little c, are renewed by God's glory to be the church he wants us to be?